It's okay not to be okay, but I promise I'm trying, by rayrae118. Chapter 17. Neville, Hermione, Ron and Ginny were seated on the couches near the fireplace. Harry rushed past them and hurried up to his door, much to their confusion and worry. He quickly opened the library section of his trunk and set his hand to the engraving of a book, and calmly stated, "Occlumency and Legilimency." It only took a moment for the book the Mind Arts identified to jump to the front. He smiled slightly, truly happy that Aunt Minerva had insisted on getting that feature added. All he needed to do was request a specific subject or topic, and the book would jump out without him needing to actually activate the bookshelves. As long as the book was in that section of the trunk, it would come when called. He hurried back downstairs and joined his friend. He asked them to hold on for a minute while he thumbed through the book. After a few minutes of silence and worried looks exchanged, he slammed the book shut. "I knew it!" he growled angrily. Hermione looked at the book in his hands with interest, while the rest looked at him more confused. Harry held up the book so they could all see it. "Dumbledore's been reading my mind," he informed them. Hermione looked scandalized, but the purebloods looked furious. "How dare he?" Neville's voice was low and enraged. Hermione looked at him, cocking her head. "What am I missing?" she asked, seeing the way they were all reacting. "I mean, it's awful." "Sure, but that doesn't explain your reactions." Neville turned to face the bushy-haired witch. His voice didn't lose any anger, but his expression softened as he explained. "The mind is the most sacred thing a person can protect. Using legilimency without permission is a heinous crime. 100 years ago it carried a sentence of a minimum 10 years in prison. If it was used on a minor, the sentence was upgraded to the Dementor's kiss. You have to understand, Hermione, that purebloods prize is their secrets, more than anything else. The old families have a lot to hide. Family magic is taught from father to son, and they keep it within the bloodlines. If anyone could just use legilimency to get information out of them, nobody would be safe." Hermione looked like she still had a lot of questions, but didn't know where to start. "Harry, how did you know?" Ginny asked curiously. "From what I've heard, Dumbledore is one of the best at legilimency. With little to no training, you shouldn't have been able to tell when he entered your mind." Harry looked down briefly before he shook back the sleeve of his robe to show the bracelet Ginny had given him for his birthday. "I'm practicing, but Aunt Minerva said it would take time and a lot of hard work. We put the same protections on my bracelet that we did on the necklace I gave you. They should stop most attacks until the time I'm able to do so by myself." Ginny looked relieved that her necklace would be powerful enough to stop even Dumbledore, but Hermione looked even more shocked. "Harry, if Dumbledore's as good as Ginny says, it should take a tremendous amount of power to be able to stop him by using a charm like that." Harry grimaced but replied dutifully, "Yeah, Hermione, it would." The reason these spells weren't more commonly used was because of their origins. Harry had found them when he was looking through one of the few books Sirius had brought him from Grimmauld Place. His godfather told him the book contains some of the Black family magic, spells that were only known to those in the Black family, and that, as his heir, Harry had both the right and responsibility to learn them. They all paused for a moment, but Harry didn't explain any more. Neville had been right when he told Hermione how secretive family magic was. As the heir to the Black family, Harry couldn't share any more information on the spell or its origins. After another minute, Hermione asked to borrow the book. Learning that Dumbledore had committed such a grievous crime seemed to have destroyed the last vestiges of hope she had that there was some other explanation. Harry smiled and nodded. "You should all read it, and I can help you get started with the meditation exercises. Aunt Minerva should be able to help us if we get stuck. This is pretty hard, so she said not to be disappointed if it takes a while to see results. I'll tell Susan tomorrow, and when you're done, she should read it as well." They were interrupted at that moment by a couple of first-year students. Hermione looked a little startled, but she couldn't help but smile when one of them, Evan, asked shyly if he could help him understand something. Harry smiled at the young boy and looked down at his book for a moment, concentrating for a brief second as he tapped his wand to the cover. He stood up and handed what was now a very passable representation of Potion Making, a Complete Guide, to Hermione and winked, before nodding towards the young Evan and his friend Sheila, if he wasn't mistaken. "Lay on, Macduff," he grinned. Evan looked confused, but Sheila smiled cautiously. That's Shakespeare, she said. Harry nodded, his own smile putting her at ease. I'm impressed. Are you muggle-raised? She nodded, looking down. I had no idea until I got my letter, she admitted. It was so exciting, though, and ever so fascinating. Harry chuckled. I think you'd get along well with my friend Hermione, he explained. She's a muggle-born as well, and still finds this world captivating. If you have any questions about anything, you can feel free to ask. I know it can be a bit overwhelming. Sheila nodded shyly, a light pink running across her cheeks. Harry sat down with the rest of the first years and started helping them untangle their first ever transfiguration assignment. He offered a grateful nod when Ginny sat down to join him a few minutes later, immediately diving in to help. Hermione, Neville and Ron moved closer, the latter two working on their divination and defence homework assignments, and Hermione, who was already mostly caught up, began to formulate their plans of an inter-house study group, so that they could have something to present to McGonagall on Tuesday after their first class with her. From time to time the witch would look up from her parchment and smile, seeing the way her friend was interacting with the young first years and with Ginny. Those two were very into the assignment, remembering their own first week and trying to keep up with everything, trying to figure out the expectations placed upon them. Her eyes lit up as she saw the closeness between Harry and Ginny. She had known that Ginny had always harboured feelings for Harry, and it seemed like the black-haired boy was finally starting to return them. When it started to get late, Harry sent the protesting 11-year-olds up to bed before he suggested they all do the same. He was shocked when he received more than one hug from the younger children. Ginny had to laugh at their bemused expressions. Face it, Potter, she grinned. You're their new favourite tutor. Harry just shook his head, giving her a hug, which she returned, before saying good night and heading up to his dorm, followed by Ron and Neville. Dear Sirius, wow, it feels so good to be able to write to you and actually use your name now. Well, I promised I'd let you know how time started. The feast was brilliant, as always. Ginny almost had to roll me up the stairs at the end of the night. I passed the ancient runes and arithmancy exams no problem, so I never officially had to take divination again, thank Merlin. Defence with Moody was interesting, to say the least. He showed us the unforgivable curses, which I guess I understand, but I wish he could have been a bit more thoughtful. I had to talk with Neville after class, and he was a little upset, seeing the Cruciatus demonstrated. I think I've made 11 lifelong friends just in the first couple of days. It all started with breakfast yesterday. As we didn't have class first period, Ginny, Ron and I offered to show the new first-year Gryffindors to the Transfiguration classroom for their first class. Hermione and I have also started planning an inter-house study group for all the first years, and maybe even upper years as well. Just because we're all in different houses shouldn't mean we don't ever spend time together. The Gryffindor first years were really excited by the idea, but we still need to talk to a few upper years in the other houses. Aunt Minerva as well. We're hoping we can do this, and I think it would be really good for the students as well. I hope you and Moony are behaving yourselves. How's Amelia? Will McGonagall Castle still be standing when I return? I miss you and I can't wait to see you again. Love, Harry. Sirius read the note from his godson and smiled. It was good to know Harry was enjoying himself, and he was happy that the term had started well. Though the thought of Moody demonstrating unforgivable curses in class was slightly worrying. Reading a part about the study group, Sirius groaned, looking over at his long-time best friend. Bad news, Moony, he said, pausing long enough for the werewolf to get worried, before he smiled. Looks like Harry's meaning to follow in your footsteps. The boy is a definite shoo-in for prefect next year. Remus growled and swatted Sirius's head. Prat, he grumbled. Sirius just laughed. The weekend passed relatively quickly. Harry finished up all his homework and helped Hermione put together a plan for their study group, trying to talk with all the upper class students that they had marked out to help. Susan was more than willing, and she said she'd talk with Cedric, as having a prefect on board could only be a good thing. Hopefully they'd get two, if Cedric was interested. And able to get Cho involved as well, as she was the 5th year girl prefect for Ravenclaw. Ravenclaw was a bit more of a challenge, but Ginny was able to ask Luna for a word on lunch on Saturday. The flighty girl was a bit of a mystery to Harry, but he liked her well enough. He had to decipher her response, but around the mentions of various mythical creatures, he was able to discern she was willing to help, though she didn't think many of her classmates would listen to her. Cedric found them after supper that night and asked for a few more details before he grinned. "That sounds like a great idea, Harry. Hogwarts could really use a little inter-house unity. Do you have anyone for Ravenclaw yet? Susan mentioned that might be a trouble spot for you." Harry and Ginny looked at each other. "We've spoken with Luna Lockwood," Ginny replied. "She wants to help, but she doesn't think the Ravenclaw students will listen to her." Cedric nodded. "I'll talk to Cho," he said. "I think she'll be on board with this, especially because it has something to do with homework." Harry grinned. "So are the two of you officially together now?" he asked. Cedric's blush was answer enough as the sixth-year prefect made a hasty exit. Harry and Ginny looked at each other and started laughing. Slytherin was the hardest to coordinate, as they knew they wouldn't welcome anyone near their dungeon common room. Sunday morning, Harry suggested that he and Ginny head out for a walk around the Quidditch pitch. She followed, willing though confused, and Harry explained that he had made their way outside. "Last year I saw Blaise and Daphne on the pitch a few times on weekends. I know Blaise enjoys Quidditch a lot, but he's never gone out for the team. I think he's more interested in playing for the sport rather than the farce Slytherin games turn into. From what I've gathered, winning through force just seems beneath him." Ginny nodded and complimented his observation skills. Harry looked down, ashamed of all of a sudden. "I'm pretty used to noticing things," he admitted quietly as they opened the doors and stepped out onto the lawn. "I had to know when Uncle Vernon was just going to deliver a slap or a punch, or if he was going in for the serious punishments. Usually, that depended on how angry he was." Ginny felt upset with herself for bringing it up, but didn't want to offer an apology, as she knew from their conversations that he hated when people apologised for things they had nothing to do with. So the two just walked in silence down to the Quidditch pitch. Luck was with them, and Ginny once more praised Harry's deduction skills, as she saw Blaise the Beanie flying around, with Daphne Greengrass sitting in the stands, a book propped up on her lap. Daphne looked up, eyes narrowing as she stood up, wand in hand, watching the two Gryffindors approach. Harry held up his hands in a peaceful manner, showing her that he was unarmed. "We just want to talk, Daphne," he said calmly. Daphne glowered. "So talk," she retorted. Harry smiled. "I'd actually like to talk with you and Blaise together. Could you call him down here? You might feel more comfortable if the numbers are evened out." Daphne's glare didn't soften, though she did feel some confusion as to why Potter was here, wanting to talk with her, even more why they wanted to have backup. She let out a whistle, and Blaise quickly made his way to her location. His wand was in his hand as well as he landed next to his friend. "What do you want, Potter?" he asked wearily. Harry remained calm, sitting down and gesturing for the rest to do the same. Ginny was the only one to comply. He took a deep breath. This conversation was too important to mess up. "We're putting together an inter-house study group for the younger years, though we were hoping it might spread to the older ones after a while. And we're trying to get people in each house to speak with their first years and to sort of be like leaders of the group. We've already got people in the other houses, but you can understand why Slytherin's a bit of a challenge. We were hoping you two might be interested." Daphne and Blaise looked at each other. "Why us?" Daphne asked, putting her wand away, now that she felt better about not being cursed. However, she remained standing. Harry shrugged. "Well, I certainly wasn't about to ask Malfoy," he replied, causing them all to snort. "You two have always remained neutral, and I get the distinct impression that all this rivalry between our houses is beneath you. Quite frankly, I'm tired of it as well. I just want to go to school and hang out with my friends. But it's a little hard to relax when I have to look out for Malfoy all the time." He sighed. "Look, I'm not suggesting that we all of a sudden become the best of friends, but this will help the new students, and perhaps do more for inter-house unity than there has been achieved since Voldemort's rise." Both Slytherins flinched at the Dark Lord's name, but Harry was pleased to see Ginny had no reaction. Blaise answered for both of them. We'll have to think about it, Potter, but I think it sounds like a good idea. You'll let us know when the first meeting is? Harry nodded, and he and Ginny stood up. Harry held out his hand, which both Blaise and Daphne shook warily, and watched carefully as the two Gryffindors left the pitch. Daphne turned to Blaise. What do you think? She asked her friend. Blaise shook his head, pocketing his wand. I think Potter's gearing up to change the wizarding world, he admitted, picking up his broom and leading her back up to the castle. Daphne chuckled. And what do you think we should do? She pressed. Blaise sighed. We're Slytherin staff. Haven't you been paying attention to the events this summer, in particular the Wizengamot meeting this week? Daphne nodded. Father had told her about it immediately after returning home that evening, and had told her that it would be in their best interests to distance themselves from both sides until a strong victor emerged. Blaise continued. I'm guessing your dad had the same talk about watching for the stronger side with you that my mum had with me? From what I've seen recently, there's going to be a new faction, with Potter and Lord Black in the lead. Even better, from what my mum says, there'll be people I wouldn't mind standing behind. No leader of the light Dumbledore, and definitely not a Dark Lord. But I think we should observe what happens this year. Helping Potter out would definitely be the smart thing to do. Daphne nodded again, indicating her agreement, and the two walked back to their common room, hoping they could keep this a secret for a few more days, before they had to deal with Malfoy and his cronies. Potions first thing Monday morning was not something Harry was looking forward to, but he was relieved when it went by much better than he could have hoped. Gryffindor only lost 10 points, and he'd managed to keep Malfoy from throwing anything in his cauldron, and he actually felt like he'd handed in a passable potion. Snape's eyebrow rose slightly as the correctly coloured brew, but he didn't comment, and schooled his face back into his typical glower. He would think on the sudden change in prowess later, but for the moment Potter was still arrogant and a dunderhead. Maybe he'd talk with Minerva later to get some answers, or maybe not. One correct potion did not mean Potter was any good at the subject. More likely he had Granger doing all the work. He conveniently ignored the fact that Potter had been working with Longbottom at that class. Tuesday was the day Harry and his friends were looking forward to. However, as soon as Transfiguration ended, Harry and Hermione made their way up to McGonagall's desk while Neville and Ron hung in the background. Minerva listened to their idea with interest, Hermione handing in the written proposal, while Harry concluded, We've already spoken with representatives of the other houses, and they're all on board. We were hoping there could be a classroom aside set up as a kind of study lounge, and we were hoping we could use for 4 more sessions, maybe once a week. Minerva glanced through the proposal. Did you have a specific time in mind? Harry and Hermione looked at each other. We haven't really thought about it. Maybe one night after dinner? This year you won't have to worry about Quidditch practices, and after dinner no one will be in class. Minerva nodded. In order for this to be officially sanctioned, you will need a faculty sponsor. I'm assuming you are asking me? Harry and Hermione shared another glance. We were actually thinking it might be 2 sponsors would be better. For just asking you, people would think we were favouring Gryffindor. We were hoping Professor Flitwick might be interested as well. Minerva had to applaud their thinking. They were really trying to get this school-wide study session going that would bridge many gaps between students. It was impressive, and based on what she saw, they had things well thought out. She nodded. Very well, I will speak with Phileas, and see if we can't get the first meeting underway the next week or 2. Harry and Hermione beamed and thanked the professor before turning around to leave with their friends. Harry? Harry turned back to face his guardian as his friends filed out in front of him. Minerva smiled. I'm very proud of you. This sounds like a well-thought-out idea, and a very good one. Hopefully it will forge friendships that will outlast any house divisions. Harry blushed. That's sort of what we were thinking, he admitted. Just because we all get separated into different houses doesn't mean we shouldn't look out for friendships outside those boundaries. Susan's a great friend, and I know Ginny really likes Luna Lovegood. We won't always be divided by house, so we should look out for connections anywhere we can, right? Minerva nodded, her smile widening as pride shone through. You've grasped a concept not many learn, Harry. Now run along, or lunch will be over, and Poppy will have my hide if you skip a meal. Harry grinned and left the room, catching up with the others before they entered the great hall. He summoned up their meeting for Ginny, and who was pleased that it had been approved, and the 5 of them made plans to get together with the other house leaders to work out the first few sessions. End of chapter 17. Sorry about an interruption back there, guys, if you heard anything. I thought someone knocked on my door. So, things are looking up. Do you think it's going to be the DA? I don't know. How about you? Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and spread your word to your friends about my channel. It will really help it grow. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, or non-binary pals. See you next chapter.